Good evening, everyone. Now, the title of this week's lesson is, it's a little obscure, touch at a distance. What exactly does that mean? Well, we're going to be talking about language and sound and music and how this can serve as a kind of touch, even if it's not a physical touch, it's a touch at a distance. So think about when you see a cute baby. And what do, you go over to it and you coo at it, right? You make noises at it. Most of us do that when we see a baby, and yet we know a baby doesn't yet have language. So why are we trying to talk to it, right? We have this desire to communicate with them through sound, even if we know they don't have language yet. There was a scientist named Anne Fernald. She was a psychology professor is a psychology professor at Stanford University. And she worked at a hospital in Munich, Germany. And one time she met these mothers who came from the obstetrics ward of the hospital. And they were from different places. They were Turkish, they were Greek, they were Sicilian, and she didn't understand their languages. But as soon as any one of them would put a baby down, they're holding it and they put it down, and they no longer had physical contact with the child, they would start to kind of sing. And all of them did this in one language after another. And this is their way to reach the child, to remain in touch with the baby, even though they weren't physically touching it anymore, was to sing to it. As a part of her work in infant studies and psychology, Anne Fernald took her tape recorder from that hospital and traveled all around the world, recording parents as they talked to very little babies. And it didn't matter what language people spoke. Everywhere she went, the words they spoke, though they were in different languages, they all had kind of the same melodies and the same tones, the same sounds to them. And if you think about even the words ma, pa, da, dad, mom, if you look at different languages, those syllables are really similar by what little babies call their parents across different languages. But what she found was really, it was kind of the tone and the sing-songiness of the words. Even though the words might be entirely different, the tone and melody of those words remain the same across languages. So for instance, she found when a parent wanted to praise a child, the melody and the sounds of the words was always kind of a rise fall, like I'm thinking of my dog, and that's why I looked over there, because my dog is. So, and we do the same thing actually with our pets too, right? So think about, I might praise my dog. Good girl, good girl. And if she was closer, she'd probably be looking at me like, oh, what did I do? But that rise and fall, that's similar across all languages when giving praise. And the Anne Fernald found other categories of expression that had consistent melodies across different languages as well, such as calling for attention, which is a rising pitch, telling children to stop, and also melodies that represented comfort. And while this might seem obvious to you if you really think about it, I mean, I know with my dog, like sometimes maybe you've done with this your pets, like dogs in particular and recognize tone of voice more than anything. Like I'll say to her sometimes like pencil, refrigerator, like say these totally random words in an excited voice and she'll get all excited because it's the tone that's important. And it's kind of the same with, not to compare dogs and babies, but it is kind of the same with human infants too. And we all do it with each other. When we talk in a high tone of voice, we're excited, and when you're angry or trying to make a point, you're talking kind of in a lower tone of voice. So, but this music is understood by infants who are new to the world, but they still recognize these different tones and these different melodies. We all know these songs inherently without really having to learn them. So we usually think of sound, and particularly speech, as being about something, or saying words about something. But what if instead sound is about touch? So we all recognize these melodies, and they have this inherent meaning to us, even regardless of the words. Now, touch isn't about something in particular. If you walked by me and suddenly gave me a whack in the arm as you went by, I'd be startled. And a very gentle touch would have a very different effect. So what if we think about sound as a kind of touch at a distance that can also affect us in these different ways? So there's this journalist and author, Johann Lehrer, who wrote a book about the connection between art and science. And he described how sound could touch our brains. Now, if you think of it from a physics perspective, what happens is compressed air travels through space and time through the air into our ears through a very little tunnel, and the waves of air diffuse, the air is vibrating, and it's focused and channeled into the eardrum. And that eardrum, just like think about a regular drum, a kettle drum in an orchestra, it vibrates from those air vibrations, and it vibrates a very few small bones that are in our ear. And then these little bones in turn transmit the vibration into this salty sea, tiny ocean, where there's hairs. And the hair cells become active, and they're literally bent over by these waves. So it goes from air waves to hitting our eardrum, which makes the bones vibrate, which makes the salty sea move, which makes the hairs bend. It's actually kind of cool and kind of complicated. And they bend like trees in the breeze. And when the hair cells bend, charged molecules flow inwards and activate cells. So the sound triggers the bones distribute the fluid rocks the hairs, and then the hairs set off essentially electricity. This flow, the molecules, these charged molecules, they're activating the cell is basically electricity. And it's when the electricity finally forms a pattern in your brain, when it's deep inside, that's when your brain translate that and hears something. So scientifically speaking, in terms of the physics of our hearing, sound very much is a process of touch, right? Because it's kind of these air waves that turn into touching bones and cells, and that makes electricity. But it's at a distance. It's touch at a distance. And as you know and have likely experienced, different sounds can make us feel different ways. So a slow dirge in a minor key can make us feel very sad, while a cheerful, upbeat, fast song can make us feel very happy. So sound enters our waves through these electrical pulses. And when the meter of those pulses is regular and rhythmic, it arrives in our mind and is heard by us as a sound that we generally like. But when the pulses going into the ear, to the brain, when it's irregular and jagged and arrhythmic and it's unpredictable and strange, it's interpreted by our brains as a sound we don't like, and it can make us very uncomfortable. So in music, a major fifth, I was going to bring something to play a major fifth with, and I should have brought my mandolin up, and I didn't. But a major fifth in music, if you think of like a bagpipe, so see da 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 da. If you think of those notes at once, it's a very pleasing sound, and that's because it has this regular electric pulse. Now, a minor second, on the other hand, in music, is something that has very chaotic and erratic electrical pulses when they're played together. So like da 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 da. If you think of those two notes together, it's usually when they're played together, it's not a very nice sound. It's kind of unpleasant. And actually, my piano students, when they have to play a second, they're like, "Oh, that sounds awful." I'm like, "Yes, it does, right? It's supposed to." And so this pleasing sound in music we call consonance. That's the kind of the rhythmic, even electric pulses, and the disturbing sounds we call dissonance. And so composers will use this in a song, because why would you have dissonance in a song at all, right? My piano student plays that. It's like, that sounds bad. But there's a reason. Composers know that when they include dissonance in music, our brains don't like it. And so they want to resolve it into consonants. So it provides a drive in music because we want to hear the resolution to that more pleasing sound. So it's used in that way. So a fun story about Igor Stravinsky, a Russian composer, considered to be one of the greatest composers of the 20th century. In May of 1913, it was a balmy summer night, and an audience was attending a Russian ballet for the debut of Stravinsky's Rite of Spring. And the program said it was a concert about springtime, but it wasn't music about flowers and bumblebees. What he had in mind was about the change and the rituals and the sometimes violent rituals that are sometimes associated with springtime. And so the music began as a classic Lithuanian folk tune, the bassoon and some flutes, but then it got a little more disturbing. And about 3 minutes in, everything changes. There's this chord. It's a really dissonant chord. So all these electrical pulses doing lots of erratic, chaotic things in your brain. And that chord pretty much lasts through the rest of the music. And it's a chord that's very difficult to hear because it is kind of the essence of dissonance. Well, the audience, after about 3 minutes, and this is a true story, after about 3 minutes of this horribly dissonant chord, the music, they rioted. They screamed. Old ladies were hitting each other with canes. There was blood, and it was just a disaster. And one theory why the audience rioted, as posed by this author, Johann Lehrer, he says that, well, the dissonance of that music, it was unfamiliar to the audience and so disturbing that their brains couldn't handle the chaos that it caused inside their heads. Now, this Rite of Spring was performed for the second time a year later, and the audience this time was more prepared for it because they had heard about what happened before. So they were able to listen to it differently, as we're able to listen to now. Like, we can listen to the Rite of Spring and not go crazy and start hitting each other. I hope. But it still may cause some weird feelings and make us feel a little bit disturbed. And actually, at that second performance of it with an audience that was prepared, they were so thrilled with the music, they actually carried Stravinsky out of the music hall upon their shoulders at the end of the performance. So, kind of a fun story. But the point being that music and sounds can affect us to such a huge degree, and they impact how we feel. They might impact how we interact with those around us. And it's this form of touch. It's like, it touches our brain. And then think about the women who were putting the babies down and singing to them. So they were probably using all those same melodies that sort of provide comfort. And so they were able to, lullabies, that's what lullabies are, is a way to provide comfort to a baby. And it's kind of like holding them in your arms without actually doing so. So let's consider music and sound as a part of our worship. Now, I know I'm a little bit biased because, I do music and all, but I think that when we sing together, and not just the singing together, but our communal recitations of passages too, I think that's a really important part of our worship, because it kind of brings us together in a way that just sitting in a circle in itself can't do. And in fact, there have been studies out there that have found that singing in a group of people creates a strong sense of closeness among those singing, and creates a real sense of community, because we're singing, the same words, we're singing the same notes, well, or mostly. But we're joined in this really powerful way and doing this thing together. And it's kind of like, especially, we're still kind of coming out of COVID and all, everyone's a little more cautious now. And when we greet each other, instead of shaking our hands or giving each other hugs, we're still doing the peace thing, right? And actually, this would have been a great lesson to do during COVID. But I think by singing, it's like we're all singing together. It's like we're all reaching out and giving each other a hug, even though we can't do so physically. We can still do so through music. So I will end with a verse from the Bible, from Colossians 3:16. And of course, sing praises to God. There's music everywhere in the Bible. And this passage says, "Let the message of Christ dwell among you richly as you teach one another with all wisdom through psalms, hymns, and songs of the Spirit, singing to God with gratitude in your hearts." So that's it for today. Go forth into your week and sing, and I'll see you next time.